Never forget that your brain filters reality. You don't experience reality as it is. You experience it as your brain allows it. And sometimes, this filter lies to you. Have you ever learned a new word and then suddenly started hearing it everywhere? Or bought a new pair of shoes, only to feel like everyone around you is wearing the same pair? Maybe you discovered a new song or artist, and all of a sudden, you hear it on the radio, in stores, and all over social media. At first, it can feel unsettling, like the universe is trying to send you a message, like there's been a glitch in the matrix and reality is repeating itself all around you. But this isn't a conspiracy, nor has the world suddenly changed. Your brain has. This experience is called the Baader-Meinhof phenomenon, scientifically accepted as the frequency illusion. It's a cognitive bias that affects how we notice and remember information. And once you understand that, you'll start noticing it everywhere, which is kind of ironic. The phenomenon happens when something you've just learned or become aware of suddenly seems to appear far more often than before. But the key word is seems. In reality, the thing was already there all along, you just weren't conscious of it. The term has an unusual origin. It comes from a terrorist group who were known as the Red Army Faction. They were active in Germany during the 1970s. Then later, in 1994, someone reading a newspaper called the St. Paul Pioneer Press came across the name of the group for the first time. They then began noticing the same name popping up again and again in articles, conversations, and other forms of media. The repetition felt so strange and specific that he wrote to the newspaper to describe the experience. That caught on, and that's when people started calling it the Baader-Meinhof phenomenon. However, the name itself is informal. The actual explanation behind the experience wasn't described until later, when in 2005, Stanford linguist professor Arnold Zwicky named and identified this effect the frequency illusion. Psychologists explain this phenomenon through two main mental processes: selective attention and confirmation bias. First, selective attention. Our brains are constantly bombarded with information, sounds, images, words, faces, ads, conversations. If we paid attention to everything, we'd be completely overwhelmed. So the brain filters information and decides what's important. When you learn something new, your brain flags it as relevant. From that point on, you start noticing it more, even though the frequency thereof hasn't actually increased. Second, confirmation bias. The brain seeks confirmation of something and ignores anything that conflicts with it. Once you notice something frequently enough, your brain starts keeping score. Every time you encounter it again, you think it's everywhere. However, you don't keep track of all the times it doesn't appear. This selective memory reinforces the illusion and makes the pattern feel real, even though it isn't. Confirmation bias doesn't just affect what we remember, it affects what we trust. The more often we notice something, the more real and important it feels, even without evidence that it actually is. Over time, repetition becomes mistaken for truth. This is why our brains don't just notice patterns, they start believing in them. Together, selective attention and confirmation bias create the frequency illusion. There are two more cognitive biases that aren't technically part of the frequency illusion, but both play a huge role in how powerful it feels: apophenia and the spotlight effect. Apophenia is the brain's tendency to see patterns, connections, or meaning in things that are actually random. Once your brain starts noticing something more often, it doesn't just stop at the noticing. It starts asking why, looking for intention, and trying to explain the pattern. This is why the frequency illusion can feel deeper than simple repetition. It doesn't just feel like something is showing up everywhere. It can feel like it's showing up for a reason. Our brains don't just register information. They automatically try to interpret it. And apophenia is what turns coincidence into something that feels more personal, significant, or intentional, even when it isn't. Then, the spotlight effect. I consider this one to be frequency illusion's close cousin. It's a cognitive bias that makes you think everyone is watching you, judging you, paying attention to your every move. You spill coffee on your shirt and spend the rest of the day convinced that every person you pass is staring at that stain. You stumble over your words in a meeting and assume everyone will remember it. But deep down, you know people are too busy thinking about themselves to remember your stupid little mistakes. Still, that doesn't stop your brain from acting like they're all staring at you. These biases coexist together. They stack. They are two sides of the same coin. They reveal how our brains distort reality, mainly by making us think we're the center of attention. In those cases, we're not seeing the world as it is. We're seeing a version filtered through our own anxieties, interests, and recent experiences. And here's where it gets interesting. These biases can actually reinforce one another. Imagine you buy new headphones. At first, it feels like you own something unique, like you've just discovered something ahead of everyone else. Then you start noticing that everyone has the same pair. You see them on the bus, your classmates are raving about them, they are all over social media. This is the frequency illusion. People didn't all rush out and buy new headphones overnight. Your brain just started reverse filtering them once they became relevant to you. At the same time, you start feeling weirdly self-conscious. You assume people are noticing the headphones, even judging them. Maybe thinking you're trendy, maybe thinking you're trying too hard. That's the spotlight effect. Lastly, your brain starts connecting these moments together. The sightings, the attention, the timings, that's apophenia at work. It can feel like they're drawing all this attention, even though most people's frequency illusion doesn't register them. The reality is simple. They were there before you got the headphones, and only after you got them did you notice their popularity. So where does the frequency illusion show up in real life? All the time, often without us noticing. You start thinking about buying a certain car, and suddenly you see it everywhere. Strange? Maybe. But sometimes it hits harder. A mother of 3 reads about a rash online, and suddenly, every tiny change in her child feels alarming. Normal behavior starts to look like symptoms, not because the child got sick, but because the parent's attention shifted. Medical students experience the same thing. Whilst learning about rare diseases, everyday sensations start to feel suspicious. They begin noticing symptoms in friends, family members, and coworkers. Their knowledge changes what they notice, and what they notice starts to feel meaningful. Technology does the same thing, only faster. Algorithms don't just reflect your interests, they amplify them. Engage with a topic once, and the internet shows it to you again and again. Eventually, it becomes almost impossible to tell whether something is truly everywhere or if it's just your brain and the internet working together. Words and names work the same way. You hear a word like serendipity, meaning a happy or beneficial thing that's happening by chance, and barely register it. Then it shows up on your English test, in an article your mom is reading, or in a post your dad sent you. Suddenly, it feels like it's following you. Or a name, like Mihalina. You haven't thought about it in years. Then you hear it on the streets, see it in a book, and meet someone with the same name. The pattern didn't appear out of nowhere. Your brain just decided that it mattered. So how do we work around the frequency illusion? How do we see the world more accurately when our brains are wired to play these weird tricks on us? The first step is simple: awareness. Just knowing the solution exists already gives you a buffer zone. When you catch yourself wondering why you're seeing something everywhere all the time, pause and ask yourself if it's actually increasing, or are you just more aware of it? The second step is to actively look for counter evidence. Our brains naturally count the hits and forget the misses. Don't let them. Pay attention to what doesn't fit the idea. This alone helps keep your perspective more balanced. The third step is to be more careful with patterns, especially emotional ones. This is where apophenia really shows. Our brains are pattern-building machines, but not every pattern means something important. Sometimes, moments are just moments, and certain coincidences are just that. The fourth step is to use the frequency illusion on purpose, aka to your advantage. Your brain keeps working even when you're not aware of it. It will find what you tell it to look for, so choose wisely. Your focus determines your reality. If you look for problems, you'll see problems. If you look for opportunities, you'll see opportunities. This is where people talk about manifestation. It's not magic. Saying I am successful over and over again doesn't make money fall from the sky. What it does is tune your attention. The change happens through focus and behavior, not your wishes. You can't turn off your brain's filtering system, but you can adjust the filters. All these examples share one truth. The external world didn't change. Your perception did. Understanding the Baader-Meinhof phenomenon tells us that our experience of reality is constructed, not recorded. This affects our beliefs, our fears, but also our decisions. This illusion can influence how we judge situations, people, and even ourselves. It can reinforce our anxieties and false patterns and make random events feel meaningful or intentional when they aren't. At the same time, it reminds us that everyone is living a slightly different version of reality. What your brain is tuned to notice is different from what mine is tuned to notice. That doesn't make either one of us wrong. It just means that our attention is constructed differently. These moments feel like coincidences, but as we know now, they are not. Once you understand that, you gain something powerful, distance from your own assumptions. So the next time you feel like the universe is repeating itself, sending you signs, or suddenly rearranging itself around you, stop and ask yourself what your brain has recently learned or started to notice. Your mind is not a window, showing you the world as it is. It's a filter, constantly sorting, highlighting, but also hiding information. That filter can mislead you, but it can also be trained. It can't be turned off, but you can question it. You can choose what you focus on, and by doing that, you gain a little more control over how you experience the world. Because your reality isn't just what happens to you, it's what your brain lets you see. Thank you.